Hello, I'm Claude Cunningham, and I've been asked to do a short tutorial on focus in videos. So this is called optical focus in videos. I talk about optical focus because one can also use focusing using artificial intelligence, and I can just quickly show you how that's done. Here's a scan of a picture of my daughter when she was about 19, and it looks quite reasonable in terms of focus. But if I use Photo Director 365, this is the clarity of the image that you get with that. And unfortunately, if you're doing video, our current computing capability is not normally up to coping with the processing that requires for every frame. So this is a useful tool coming in the future one day when all our computers are much faster than they are at the moment. We can see what the needs are by looking at this picture that I took of my wife when we were stopped at a stop-go in the Karoo, and we went out and plucked a daisy, and I took a picture of Maureen, my wife, and you can see that the main focus is on her face, and the next area of focus is outside the car, and that's as it should be. But how do we make sure that the right thing is in focus? It becomes more complex when you want to focus in the middle distance, as this picture shows, again of my wife, taken a few years ago, and you can see that the background and the foreground are necessarily out of focus, but I've managed to catch the focus on her face and on her eyes in particular. This actually gets quite difficult with modern autofocusing cameras. Right, let's move on to how do you achieve focus on a particular item in the viewfinder. And we'll use mobile phones because it's easier for me to demonstrate that by having my camera looking at a mobile phone. All of these modern cameras do autofocus as a default situation, and often it's very good, especially in bright light. But it's helpful to know that you can direct where the focus is on the screen. You don't have to point it in the middle of the middle of the camera at what you want to focus. If there's something on the side, you just touch on the screen the area that you wanted to focus on. So you've directed the focus there. And a little lock and a little circle will come up, and the hatch of the lock will be open. And it'll disappear after a bit because that's where the focus is there. But as you move the camera, the focus will change as well as under autofocus rules. But you can do more than that. You can lock the focus distance by not only touching the screen, but holding your finger there so that the little lock comes up and the hatch closes. That means that when you move the camera, the focus will stay at the distance where you locked it, and we'll illustrate that. Then you can dial up manual focusing on your mobile phone. If you go to Pro mode, on a Samsung phone anyway, and I'll demonstrate how that works, that you can actually use your finger to move the focus in and out. And there's a useful feature that comes up, which is called peaking, which is when that part of the picture, which is in perfect focus, gets colored, usually a green or yellow background. So you know that even if your eyes aren't good, that you're in focus there. When you're not using autofocus, you can then use your finger on the screen. And if you just tap
the picture at any particular point, it'll focus there. You'll see that, it's interesting, it's not, there we are. You can see that little lock there is open. It means that it's focusing in that area of the screen, and if you change it to another position, it'll change with it. But if I hold the finger on the position, it's getting confused with that. Okay, now the focus at that point is now locked. It means that if I turn the camera around, it remains focused close. It is not refocusing on those points. And there, when I touched it, it then locked on that point, and now it's not just focusing here. That's because it's not, I only touched it there. It's locked there. I mean, it's focused there, but it's not locked. But if I touch then, leave it there, it goes yellow. And now when I move it back here, it's still sort of focused, isn't it? And it's showing that it's locked. But if I touch it again, there it's better focused. So all this depends on having very good eyesight on very small screens. Right, what we're looking at here is a cell phone, and I've set it on manual focus. It's looking at the keyboard of my computer. And if I look here at the manual focus setting, if I change the focus to bring it closer, you'll see that suddenly everything turns green on the keyboard. And that means that it's in focus, the green areas are in focus. That's gone beyond, it's focusing too close. That's focusing everywhere pretty well, and that's in the distance. So that's how to use manual focus. And this highlighting with green or whatever color works on your camera, that's called peaking, P-E-A-K-I-N-G, and that's a very handy way to focus.
When we move from cell phones to digital cameras, you have many more options, and I'm not going to cover all of the options, but here's what the settings are just on the camera that I've got. First of all, of course, most people are happy with just one central area in the viewfinder, but you can make it wide or you can make it small. And when it's small, then you can obviously get more refined choice of what you're focusing on. You've also got manual focusing if you select that as an issue. The custom multi-focusing is interesting. On my camera, there's like 49 spots that you can activate in any pattern that you like. And that will help you. Alternatively, you can attach a particular face. It'll recognize the face and track that and focus in on that as you zoom or move the camera around. It'll even focus on left or right eye. So it's worth just studying the instruction book and experimenting. I mean, you're not using film up, so experiment and see the difference it makes with these various options for a digital camera. As important as focusing on the particular item that you're interested in is the depth of field around that object and whether you want to separate that object out or if you want to be able to see everything in the picture. This is called depth of field, and you can either have a kind of narrow depth of field or very wide depth of field. And your zoom has a major effect on your depth of field. The other thing that has a big effect is aperture, but we won't worry about that now because zoom is the most important and easiest thing to use to isolate things. This is taken on our patio, and I've put a small pot with a succulent in it on the table near to me, and I'm using the camera with the wide angle setting on the lens. It's on minimum zoom. And you can see that while the pot plant is in focus, pretty much everything around it is, if not in sharp focus, you can see it quite clearly. The indication of how wide the angle is the focal length of the camera, focal length of the lens, I should say. And the smaller the focal length, the more wide angle it is. So this is about a 4mm focal length for this picture. If I zoom in and then move back so that the plant is about the same size, we now see that we're at 29mm, which is like 8 times the zoom of the previous picture. We've zoomed in a great deal, and the pot plant, which I've now focused on, put my finger on it to identify it in the camera, and the background is way out of focus, which is great. It's separated it out. If I hadn't focused on the pot plant, if I just let it do autofocus over a broad area, it probably would, in fact, it would have looked exactly like this. Same telephoto setting on the lens, but the pot plant is out of focus. So it's very important to understand the difference that your zoom makes on your depth of field. It's not only about focusing.